Daniel Carter knew something was off the moment he held Liam for the first time in the hospital. He wanted to feel the overwhelming bond of fatherhood, the connection he had dreamed about for months. But instead, a nagging doubt crept in, whispering that something didn't add up. Vanessa, his wife of 8 years, sat propped up in bed, cradling their newborn son with a tired but radiant smile. "Isn't he perfect?" she asked, her voice trembling with emotion. Daniel forced a smile, nodding. Liam was beautiful, there was no denying that, but as he studied the baby's delicate features, he couldn't shake the unease. Liam's hair was a shade lighter than his own dark brown, his complexion fairer than either his or Vanessa's. It was subtle, but enough to plant a seed of doubt. "Yeah," Daniel said, his voice quieter. "Perfect." The unease had been building for months. Vanessa's behavior during her pregnancy had been unusual. She had started taking yoga classes with a new instructor, Mark Jenkins, and her enthusiasm for the sessions bordered on obsession. She mentioned Mark frequently, laughing at his jokes and praising his teaching style. When Daniel questioned her about it, she'd brushed him off, saying he was being insecure. "It's just yoga, Daniel," she had said with an exasperated laugh. "You don't have to read into everything." But Daniel noticed the way she'd started guarding her phone, the hurried way she'd swipe away messages when he entered the room. He wasn't the type to pry, but the secrecy gnawed at him. Then there were the late nights out, the vague explanations about needing me time, and the way she'd grown distant, even cold, during the final months of her pregnancy. Back in the hospital room, Daniel's thoughts were interrupted when Vanessa's doctor, Amanda Brooks, entered. Dr. Brooks had been their family physician for years, and her warm demeanor usually put Daniel at ease. Not this time. "How's everyone doing?" Amanda asked, her eyes scanning Vanessa and Liam before landing on Daniel. "We're good," Vanessa said brightly. Daniel hesitated, then spoke. "Actually, doctor, I was wondering about something." Vanessa's smile faltered. "What is it, Daniel?" she asked, her tone laced with irritation. "It's nothing," Daniel said quickly, directing his words to Amanda. "Just thinking about Liam's medical records. Wouldn't it make sense to have a paternity test on file, for completeness?" The room went still. Vanessa's face turned pale, her grip on Liam tightening. "That's ridiculous," she said, forcing a laugh. "Why would we need that? He's your son, Daniel." "It's standard in some cases," Amanda interjected diplomatically, sensing the tension. "If it's something you both agree on, we can arrange it." Vanessa turned to Daniel, her eyes blazing. "This is humiliating. How could you even suggest such a thing?" Daniel met her gaze, his voice measured but firm. "It's just for clarity, Vanessa. Medical records should be accurate." Vanessa's jaw clenched, her voice dropping to a sharp whisper. "Fine, do it if you must, but you're wasting your time." The ride home from the hospital was silent, the air between them heavy with unspoken words. Vanessa stared out the window, her arms wrapped protectively around Liam while Daniel gripped the steering wheel, his mind racing. He didn't want to believe his suspicions. He wanted to trust her, to feel confident in their marriage and in the life they were building together. But the doubt was relentless, and now it had a foothold. Over the next few days, Daniel tried to push the thought aside, focusing instead on his new role as a father. He changed diapers, rocked Liam to sleep, and marveled at how tiny and fragile his son seemed. But every time he looked into Liam's eyes, the doubt resurfaced, stronger than before. Vanessa, meanwhile, acted as if nothing had happened. She was cheerful, affectionate, and attentive, but Daniel could see through the facade. She was trying too hard, overcompensating for the crack in their foundation that she refused to acknowledge. One evening, as Daniel paced the living room with a fussy Liam in his arms, Vanessa approached him. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice soft but guarded. He nodded, handing her the baby and sitting on the couch. "What's going on, Daniel?" she asked, her tone a mix of curiosity and frustration. "Why are you acting so distant?" "You know why," he said simply. Vanessa sighed, her shoulders slumping. "I can't believe you don't trust me. After everything we've been through, you think I'd lie to you about something like this." "I don't want to think that," he said, his voice rising slightly. "But you're not exactly giving me reasons to feel otherwise. The secrecy, the excuses. It doesn't add up, Vanessa." Her eyes filled with tears, and for a moment he felt a pang of guilt. But then she spoke, her words cutting through his resolve. "It's the stress, okay, the pregnancy, the hormones. I wasn't myself. But that doesn't mean I cheated on you. Liam is your son, Daniel, I swear." He leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. "Then the test will prove it, won't it?" Vanessa flinched as if struck. "Fine," she said, her voice trembling. "Do the damn test. But when it comes back and shows you're wrong, I hope you'll apologize for putting me through this." Daniel didn't respond. He couldn't. All he could do was wait for the truth to reveal itself. When Amanda called 2 days later to schedule the test, Vanessa was cold and distant, barely speaking to Daniel as they drove to the clinic. She sat stiffly in the passenger seat, her arms crossed over her chest while Daniel focused on the road, his jaw tight. The test itself was quick and clinical, but the tension lingered long after they left the clinic. Vanessa didn't say a word on the way home, and Daniel didn't press her. The results would be ready in a week. 7 days that felt like an eternity. As they lay in bed that night, Daniel stared at the ceiling, his mind racing. He wanted to believe her, to trust that the life they had built together wasn't a lie. But deep down, he knew the truth was coming and there was no turning back. 6 days after the paternity test, Daniel sat in the kitchen, staring blankly at his laptop. The soft hum of the refrigerator was the only sound in the room. Vanessa was in the nursery, rocking Liam to sleep. The tension in the house had grown unbearable, each interaction between them laced with unspoken accusations and fragile pretenses. A sudden buzz from Vanessa's phone on the countertop broke the silence. Daniel glanced at it instinctively. The screen lit up with a name he'd seen too many times before, Mark Jenkins. His breath hitched as he read the preview of the message. "Can't stop thinking about last week. When can we talk?" Daniel's hand trembled as he picked up the phone. His heart pounded in his chest, anger surging through him. He clenched his jaw, forcing himself to stay calm. He tapped on the message, but the phone required a passcode. "Vanessa," he called out, his voice tight. She appeared in the doorway moments later, her expression wary. Liam was asleep in her arms, and she placed him carefully in his bassinet before stepping into the kitchen. "What is it?" she asked, her tone clipped. Daniel held up her phone. "Mark just texted you." Her face blanched, but she quickly masked her reaction. "So," she said, crossing her arms. "Don't play games with me, Vanessa," he snapped, standing up. "What does he mean by last week? What happened last week?" She rolled her eyes, feigning exasperation. "It's nothing, Daniel. He's just being dramatic. He probably means yoga or some class-related thing. You're overreacting." "Overreacting?" Daniel's voice rose. "You expect me to believe this is about yoga, can't stop thinking about last week. Thinking about what, Vanessa? Yoga poses, or was there something else?" Vanessa's cheeks flushed red, a mix of anger and panic flashing across her face. "You're unbelievable," she hissed. "You've been acting paranoid for months. Mark is just my friend, Daniel. That's all he's ever been." Daniel's laugh was cold and bitter. "Friends don't send messages like this, and friends don't make you act like you've got something to hide." "I'm not hiding anything," she shouted, her voice cracking. "You're the one tearing this family apart with your constant suspicions." Don't you dare try to turn this on me, Daniel said, his voice low and dangerous. I've given you every chance to be honest with me, but instead you lie, you dodge, and you expect me to look the other way. Vanessa glared at him, her chest rising and falling as she struggled to find the right words. Fine, she finally said, her voice trembling. You want the truth? Mark and I went out for coffee last week after yoga. That's it. Nothing happened, but I didn't tell you because I knew you'd react like this. Daniel's eyes narrowed. You're not telling me the whole story. What else, Vanessa? What else are you hiding? Nothing, she cried, tears streaming down her face now. I swear, Daniel, it's just coffee. You're reading too much into this. He shook his head, his expression hard. You can swear all you want, but I'm done taking your word for anything. The DNA results come back tomorrow. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that the truth always comes out. Vanessa stood frozen, her tears falling silently as Daniel brushed past her and headed upstairs. He closed the bedroom door behind him, leaving her alone in the kitchen, clutching her phone. For the first time, her facade cracked completely, and a sob escaped her lips. Upstairs, Daniel sat on the edge of the bed, staring into the darkness. He didn't feel relief or satisfaction, only a hollow ache that grew with each passing moment. Tomorrow, everything would change. For better or worse, the truth was coming. 2 days later, the DNA results arrived. Daniel sat at the dining table, his laptop open in front of him. Vanessa was upstairs with Liam, oblivious to the storm brewing downstairs. As Daniel clicked on the email, his stomach churned. The words stared back at him, probability of paternity, 0%. He closed the laptop and leaned back in his chair, a cold, hollow sensation spreading through him. The confirmation was there, undeniable. Liam was not his son. Vanessa's footsteps descended the stairs, her voice carrying softly as she spoke to Liam. Daddy's going to be so happy to see you, she cooed. The words made Daniel's jaw tighten. When she walked into the room, her smile faltered at the sight of him. What's wrong? She asked, sensing the tension. Sit down, Daniel said, his voice low and controlled. Vanessa hesitated, glancing nervously at his expression before settling into the chair across from him. Liam squirmed in her arms, and she shifted him to her shoulder. The results came in, Daniel said, sliding the laptop toward her. Her face paled as she read the email. Her lips parted, but no words came. Finally, she whispered, Daniel. Don't, he interrupted sharply, his voice rising. Don't you dare try to explain this away. Tears filled her eyes, but he didn't let up. You swore to me, Vanessa, you swore Liam was mine. Every time I doubted, every time I questioned, you lied to my face. And now this. His voice cracked with anger. How long, Vanessa? How long have you been lying to me? Vanessa clutched Liam tighter, her tears spilling over. It wasn't supposed to happen this way, she stammered. I didn't know for sure. I thought there was a chance he was yours. A chance? Daniel shouted, slamming his hand on the table. Liam started crying, and Vanessa stood, bouncing him nervously to calm him. Put him down, Daniel said coldly. What? Put him down, he repeated. He's not mine. I don't want to see him right now. Vanessa hesitated, then reluctantly placed Liam in his bassinet in the living room. She returned to the table, trembling. It was Mark, wasn't it? Daniel demanded. Her silence confirmed it. For how long? He pressed. Vanessa wiped her tears, her voice barely audible. A year. Daniel laughed bitterly, shaking his head. A year. While I was working late, making sure you and Liam would have everything you needed, you were sleeping with him. I didn't mean for it to happen, she said desperately. It just did. You were always so busy, so distant. I felt alone, Daniel. Don't you dare blame this on me, he snapped. You made this choice, Vanessa, you destroyed our family. She reached out to touch his hand, but he pulled away. Please, Daniel, she begged. We can fix this. I love you. I made a mistake, but we can get through it. No, he said firmly, standing up. You don't get to call this a mistake. This wasn't a one-time thing. This was a year of lies, a year of betrayal. And now there's a child involved, a child that isn't mine. Vanessa sobbed, but Daniel's resolve only hardened. I'm filing for divorce, he said. You and Mark can figure out how to raise Liam. I'm done. What about us? She cried. What about everything we've built together? You destroyed it, he said simply. There's nothing left to save. He walked past her, grabbing his jacket and keys. As he opened the door, he paused. You should call Mark, he said without looking back. He's Liam's father. He should start acting like it. The door closed behind him, leaving Vanessa alone in the house, her sobs echoing in the empty room. 2 months later, Daniel stood in the kitchen of his new apartment, sunlight streaming through the tall windows. The space was sleek and modern, a sharp contrast to the suburban home he had once shared with Vanessa. Boxes were stacked neatly in the corner, and a fresh pot of coffee brewed on the counter. The apartment still smelled new, a reminder of the fresh start he had carved out for himself. His phone buzzed on the counter. It was his lawyer, Sarah Coleman. He answered immediately, her voice brisk and professional. It's done, Daniel, she said. The divorce was finalized this morning. The settlement terms stood as agreed, and Vanessa signed the documents last night. You're officially free. Daniel exhaled deeply, a weight lifting from his chest. Thank you, Sarah, he said. I appreciate everything you've done. Of course, Sarah replied. If you need anything else, you know where to reach me. Take care, Daniel. He hung up, staring at the phone for a moment before setting it down. The relief was overwhelming, but so was the sting of what he had endured. He poured himself a cup of coffee and walked to the balcony, leaning on the railing as he looked out over the city. He was free. Free from the lies, the betrayal, and the constant weight that Vanessa's actions had placed on him. Later that afternoon, Anne came by, carrying a housewarming gift, a bottle of wine and a small potted plant. She stepped into the apartment and smiled. This place is amazing, she said, setting the plant on the counter. It suits you. Thanks, Daniel said. It feels good to have something that's mine. Anne nodded, her expression softening. How are you feeling now that it's official? Daniel shrugged, relieved, angry, but mostly ready to move on. Anne smiled. Good, you deserve that. She hesitated, then added, I ran into Vanessa a few days ago. Daniel's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. She's struggling, Anne continued. Mark's out of the picture. He refused to take any responsibility, and she's on her own with Liam. Daniel's face remained impassive. That's her problem, he said simply. Anne nodded, not pressing further. I just thought you should know, not that it changes anything. It doesn't, Daniel said firmly. She made her choices. Now she has to live with them. They spent the evening talking about lighter topics, and for the first time in months, Daniel felt a sense of peace. As Anne left, Daniel stood at the door, watching her walk to her car. When he closed the door, he turned to the apartment, his mind clear. He wasn't the man he had been 2 months ago, a man weighed down by doubt and betrayal. He was stronger now, focused on himself and the future he was building. He grabbed his laptop from the counter and opened it, reviewing a proposal he had been working on for a major client. His career had taken off since he threw himself into his work, and the financial freedom it afforded him was another reminder that he had come out of this stronger. The past was behind him, and as for Vanessa, she was nothing more than a distant memory, a cautionary tale of betrayal and its consequences. Daniel leaned back in his chair, a faint smile on his lips. He wasn't just surviving. He was thriving.